Greetings, sports media consumer. So, there was a tweet from J. Caspian Kang, great writer at The New Yorker, about the NBA abandoning politics and how this is so under-discussed. The tweet came on Tuesday of Memorial Day, and let me just read it right here. He said, "Few things in sports aging worse than the NBA's social justice moment. Truly weird time that basically disappeared. When's the last time you saw anything about social justice from the NBA?" Now, this tweet, I think, is worth discussing. I believe the NBA made a hard shift away from politics between 3 and 4 years ago that has been ignored. And it has been ignored because both sides of the political aisle do not want to talk about it. So, we'll get into why the NBA abandoned politics. We'll get into precisely how they did it. And then we will discuss why neither side actually wants to talk about that, which is why it's almost like a secret. Very strange. It's the perfect time to do it, too, because the NBA just signed this big media rights deal. It has survived a relatively turbulent time culturally. So let's get into it. Okay, so here's what happened. What Jay is referring to is the 2020 bubble. You all remember what 2020 was like, or would prefer to forget. Not only was it highly influenced by the pandemic, people are inside, but it was politically overheated. Now, the NBA responded to that moment where there was a lot of energy and activism regarding George Floyd and police brutality and everything else by having social justice jerseys in a bubble championship and playoffs that they had in Orlando, Florida. Now, these jerseys, these social justice jerseys, they were goofy, but in a way nobody in the media was allowed to laugh at. Now we can look back and we can laugh, but I'll tell you who was not laughing. It was Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, when their finals viewership, 2 games in, it was averaging 6.6 million viewers. Now, it would be great for this YouTube video. I would be very happy with over 6 million viewers. But considering that the last time before that LeBron James had powered his way to a championship, the average was 20 million viewers. The NBA was very scared about it. So 2 games into that finals, Adam Silver announced that there isn't going to be any more of this sloganeering. They had BLM and all sorts of slogans on the court. Silver said that we're not going to have that anymore. So that was announced right there. But it wasn't just about that. It wasn't just about that moment. The NBA pulled back nearly completely. They used to get involved. In 2016, there was something that we colloquially know as the bathroom bill in North Carolina. The NBA threw down. They said that we are not going to have the All-Star game in Charlotte unless this bill is changed. And other leagues followed suit. So the NBA from a top-down level was very involved in politics, specifically from the lefty side of things, or you could say the Democratic side of things, or however you want to put it. But after the 2020 bubble, they decided to take a back seat. And it's worth looking at what they did and how they did it because it's perhaps a model that other corporations will use or are already using. I call it divide and sponsor. What the NBA did is they set up something called the Social Justice Coalition within their league. And that was just for the players who liked activism and wanted to be activists to represent what they want, to say, we are looking towards reforming this particular bill, we are speaking out on this particular issue. But if you came to the NBA and you said, hey, what's your corporate stance on this big controversial thing, this law, whatever, they would say, we don't really comment. There's a social justice coalition. That's the players. You can ask them. And I think it allowed a bit of an outlet for the players to say what they wanted to say without the NBA from the top down attaching its brand to highly controversial topics. While this was happening, baseball was still doing what the NBA used to do, and it was moving its All-Star game due to a voting bill in Georgia that the MLB disagreed with highly, I suppose, even if many of its fans are Republican and wanted that bill because they thought that that was the right thing to do, and those were protections for voting. The other side of that was the Democrats saying, no, this is unfair. The MLB got involved. In that era, the NBA was already out of there. They were already done with the politics. So I think that it's been pretty successful for the NBA. They haven't really gotten enmeshed in controversies, and I'm not placing a moral value on that, by the way. I'm just saying successful business-wise. They haven't really gotten involved in controversies. They've allowed their players to say whatever, and they haven't recaptured the old highs of viewership and popularity, but they've at least gotten it to a point where they're going to sign a record TV rights deal. So let's get to the end of this, which is, why doesn't anybody want to admit it happened? Now, I think that you just have to look at the group incentives and maybe how both groups feed off one another. On one side, on the right, you have media outlets that had made the NBA the archetypal woke league, the boogeyman, the enemy. This happened after, or maybe even before, LeBron James attacked Daryl Morey for speaking out against what China was doing in Hong Kong, and that became a big to-do. And NBA players during the Trump era started feuding with Donald Trump. The NBA became very lefty-coded, very democratic-coded, what have you, and then it became the enemy on conservative media outlets. So once the NBA shifted away from the political scene and stopped being involved, you still had this incentive to use the NBA as a piñata at these right-leaning outlets. Now, on the other side, at the left-leaning outlets, they wanted the NBA to be activists, and they wanted the NBA to succeed while being activists. And they were addicted to fighting the right and fighting the conservative outlets and protecting the NBA. So they didn't really have an incentive to say, hey, the NBA exited the political scene and they're no longer part of this fight, because they wanted to have that fight. Both sides wanted to have that fight. So the fact that the NBA exited that fight and decided not to have that fight really ceased to be part of the conversation. That was not covered. It was underrated. It was under-discussed. And here we are today. We are here today with the NBA compartmentalizing the activism, compartmentalizing the social justice, if you will, and nobody being any bit the wiser, with the exception, perhaps, of Jay Caspian King at The New Yorker. Okay, so that's how it went. Maybe my explanation satisfies everybody on every side. Maybe it infuriates everybody on every side. I'm not sure. I just know, I believe that's how it happened. Thanks.